Stories are never just stories. They reveal emotional patterns about what we live in real life. And while today's story might not be one that you are familiar with, you don't need to have watched the show to understand and learn from its patterns. Today we are going to analyze the Winx's personalities, how that explains they should not be good getting along half as well as they do in the show, and how we can better understand the people in our lives and have better relationships. We're gonna be here for a while. Go grab your tea, your lemonade, your coffee, whatever that is that you like drinking, and go do your chores or whatever it is that you like doing while you watch to this video. And we're going to get into it. I've got a cup of tea here myself. And for those of you who remember I live in France, while it's the heat wave, I do have the AC on, and I like having a cup of tea regardless of the weather. Fortunately, it's not hot in like my room because of the AC. Otherwise, I would be cooked, because my room is the hottest room in the house and also the coldest room in the house depending on the weather. So the AC is the savior here. So now that we're getting into it, let me tell you about the Big Five and why I'm using the Big Five and not any other personality model for it. So the Big Five is, first of all, the only scientifically validated framework to understand and analyze personality, and it's basically measuring 5 traits, and 5 traits that are on a scale. So depending on where you are on the scale, you can have really an infinite amount of personality types. Like it's very thorough. So the traits that are measured, they're actually what stands for Ocean, which is the acronym for the Big Five model. It's also called Ocean. And so Ocean refers to O, openness, C, conscientiousness, E, extraversion, A, agreeableness, and N, neuroticism. All those traits are going to be really important into the analysis of the Winx Club's personalities, and also later on when we discuss how we can better understand the people around us, because where we are in each of these traits kind of dictate what we are comfortable with, what is our default, and so how it can rub us the wrong way when we're being pulled out of our comfort zone because someone else's trait is not on the same position at the scale. If you're in the middle here and someone is at the other end, it's gonna be, quite the leap. So you might not be as comfortable with by someone whose approach is here on the scale. And basically the principle is meet people where they're at. So if you figure out what their ocean is, it's pretty easy to get them to be more comfortable around you and to actually be able to have a better rapport with them or to better understand them. And the reason why I think and I wanted to do this analysis with the Winx is because they're portrayed as like the best of friends in the show that's sometimes fight, but not as much as I think they should. Because again, let's remember that the Winx are teenagers and they have very different personalities. So taking that into account, the portrayal of their relationship and their friendship is very unrealistic. So let's actually deep dive into what. I will put the video I made about how to figure out one's ocean, and this goes much deeper into the Big Five personality model itself and how you can figure out your own personality traits and other people's personality traits, and also the link to the test for it, the quiz for it. That will be at the end of the video, so if you want to check it out once you're done, watching this one, please watch this one first. I greatly encourage you to do that. You will see that the presence on camera is a bit different. I was not nearly as comfortable in front of my camera, and my camera is actually on my phone back then, so you will see that I was a lot more stiff. Anyways, let's actually start analyzing the Winx. Oh, before I forget, and yes, I'm being a bit scattered here. That's kind of the point of the format, actually. At the end of this video, I am going to pull an oracle card so that you have something to sit with before you leave. And I know which oracle card it is because I pulled it just a couple of hours ago. I haven't read the description for it yet, and I'm kind of new to oracle cards in general, even though I do have this deck for a few months or at least a year, but I've never really looked into it. So yeah, this is going to be a new discovery for me and you. Back to the Winx. I'm going to list out what I think each of their personality traits are. Do feel free to write down in comments if you agree, disagree, what you would think they would be if you disagree, down in the comments. I would love to read that. It's really fun, you know, to really figure out people's personalities. I love doing this. I might just read you what each letter of evolution stands for first, just so that you can know what it means when I say they're low, average, or high in this trait. And again, being low, average, or high does not mean good, bad, or boring. You know, it just is descriptive. It's not a qualitative. So yeah, just means personality is, it's not like worth anything. And wherever you are on the scale, it's not necessarily good or bad. It's what you do with it and how well you handle it, because it can be both a quality and a flaw. So just thought to preface this. Okay, so openness is about how curious, imaginative, creative, and open to new ideas and experiences someone is. So someone who's very high in openness, very curious, imaginative, etc., etc. Someone who's quite low is someone who loves their routines, who loves facts, who is practical, for example. Conscientiousness is about being organized, responsible, disciplined, and focused on goals. So someone who's very high in conscientiousness, someone very ambitious, organized, etc. Someone who is low, on the other end, is someone who might not be ambitious at all and who is quite chill and doesn't really care to be thorough, which isn't necessarily a bad thing either. Extraversion is about how sociable, energetic, assertive, and engaged with the outside world someone is. So if you draw energy from people, you're very extroverted, and if you get drained from people, you're on the end of the scale, you're introverted, and people can fall, of course, somewhere along the middle. Agreeableness means how kind, cooperative, trusting, empathic, and concerned about others you are. Doesn't mean that people who are low on that scale are bad. It just means that they don't particularly care to think about how other people feel all the time necessarily, which again isn't necessarily a bad thing. Very good example, someone whose job is to do audits and figure out corruption and then fire the people who are doing bad things. If you personally care about the people and like being fired because you're really empathetic, it's gonna be hard. But if you are not someone who is very agreeable, that kind of job is much easier. And it's quite good, I think, to be when you need to make decisions and you don't just get torn apart from the decision you take that might influence other people. Not saying that low agreeableness is being a dick, but you know, again, if not well managed, that is what's happening. Let's get to the last one. Neuroticism is about how likely someone is to experience negative emotions, so that anxiety, stress, sadness, and or irritability. So on a daily basis, how often do you experience negative emotions? So I think that Bloom is average in all 5. Do tell me if you agree. I think that Stella is high in openness, low in conscientiousness, high in extraversion, low in agreeableness, and low in neuroticism. I think Flora is high in openness, high in conscientiousness, low in extraversion, high in agreeableness, and average in neuroticism. By the way, I'm just going to slightly justify here. I said average and not high neuroticism for Flora because while she does experience negative emotions, anxiety mostly, and also she feels self-conscious a lot, she doesn't really feel sad, depressed, or angry that much, which is why she's average for me. Musa is average in openness, average in conscientiousness, average in extraversion, low average in agreeableness, and average high in neuroticism. For Musa, I find it a bit more difficult to truly pinpoint where she is for agreeableness and neuroticism because to me it's very clear that she's a very wounded individual. So her pain is very obvious while watching the show. So how much is it about Musa's default, and how much is it because she is still living in her pain and hasn't healed or addressed it yet? That is how she is behaving. Do tell me in the comments what you think about that. She is truly the one that I am most quote-unquote uncertain of where she truly is, if I had to pinpoint into low, average, and high for agreeableness and neuroticism. Tecna, she is low in openness, high in conscientiousness, she is low in extraversion, she is low in agreeableness, and she is low in neuroticism. You might have noticed that Tecna is very different from most of the Winx on that regard. She has a lot of traits that are like on the lower end of things. Again, not a good or a bad thing. And finally, Layla. She is, I think, either low or average in openness, high in conscientiousness, average high in extraversion. She is average high in agreeableness, and she is average in neuroticism. I think for Layla, well, for the other letters, I am not too sure of myself quite yet, if I'm just using the information from season 2 and not other seasons. But for neuroticism, I would put her more so in average rather than low or high, because I do think that she was much more prone to negative emotions while she was still in her fear. And I feel like for her character, because she did have a character arc through season 2, she was less so in her negative emotions by the end of the season. So I do think she might be more average. I don't think she's low necessarily, because I do think she is a warrior. Warrior and warrior. A and O. Both. Okay. So now that we've got their oceans and, you know, the breakdown of if they're average, they're low, or they're high, let me really tell you about what to look out for with each of those letters. So what you need to look out for is if you have differences. So if you're someone who is low and someone else is high, you're going to have difficulty to breach that gap in between. And as you have noticed, the Winx are a mixed bags of personality traits, and the most obvious and the ones who stand out the most are, first of all, Tecna and also Stella. If you have noticed, Tecna and Stella are the ones who have the most difficult time one-on-one with the other Winxes. Tecna is more so because she's more introverted, she doesn't like try as much, but Stella, being very extroverted, does put her foot in her mouth a lot. And I think a lot of it has to do with the fact that she's low in agreeableness. Whereas, for example, if you have something to say, someone who is high in agreeableness might abstain because they might worry it's going to hurt someone's feelings because they care about what other people think and feel about them. So someone who is low in agreeableness, like Stella, is not even going to think about that because it's not even on her radar of things to consider. She's just gonna see it. So this is why Stella gets into so much conflict, and in my opinion, not even remotely enough conflicts for the personality that she has. Another thing about people who are low in agreeableness and people who are high in agreeableness, we've got our people pleasers. We have got our conflict avoidant people. And so at the other end of the scale, you've got people who don't care to please people, and you have people who don't really care to be polite, people who don't really scare away from fights. They're like, no, we're going to go for it. So as you will have noticed, most of the Winx are either average or high in agreeableness. Stella is the only one who is low in agreeableness with Tecna, But whereas Tecna is introverted and so might not share her opinion or expression as often, Stella is not. And another thing too, where that is really interesting, because actually Stella and Tecna are very similar in that regard, because they both have low neuroticism, which means they are not people who panic. They are chill. And that is something that is another layer of conflict, because sometimes people who don't really worry, who don't really get sad, who don't really experience negative emotions, will have trouble relating to people who do, and who do on a consistent basis. And by that I mean Musa and Flora mostly in the Winx Club. But at the end of the spectrum, it's also that someone like Musa and Flora can't understand someone like Stella or Tecna that don't worry. And so they operate from a state of default chill, of peace of mind all the time. And so you might behave irrationally when you're in the throes of negative emotions more often than people who are not in the throes of negative emotions. So I think this is why you can see the relationship dynamic between Stella and Musa a lot. I do think though, because in the show, what they showed, and this was in the Cloud Tower episode, was that Bloom and Tecna are not very compatible, and Musa and Stella are not very compatible. And then they put Flora and Layla together, mostly because there were two who were left. But what's interesting is that Flora and Layla at that point in time were also a bad match, because it was basically two people who worried a lot that were put together. But you know what happens when you have two people who worry? There is no one else to be the calm-headed one. And so this is the really good thing about being low in Neuroticism, is that you keep your head to yourself, you keep a cool head, and also you don't really get distracted, or you don't really get pulled into negativity, which means you're much more objective about things. And being objective is good, but when you're both low on Neuroticism, so objective without negative emotions clouding your mind, but also low in Agreeableness, which means that you might not be as careful about how you say things, because you don't really think about being careful about how you say things, it leads for a pretty great combo for conflict. So, Tecna and Stella are very similar in that regard. Now, Stella and Musa are very interesting to look at as a quote-unquote pairing when we have those two characters together, because they are the Winx who are the most wounded out of the Winx. I mean, before Layla came in, but even then, Layla does handle her wounds and her pain in a way that is not projecting onto other people, and also she does have her character arc of healing in season 2. I mean, I do know it's not exactly the end by season 2, but Layla makes a lot of progress within the span of one season, whereas Stella and Musa, you can see that they're very much still within that. The Stella is much more upfront and open about it, whereas Musa might not be aware that this is what's going on really. I mean, she's not. Apologies, I do need to drink my tea, my throat feels dry. So I talked about how agreeableness and Neuroticism can really impact how relationship dynamics can happen. Another thing too about agreeableness, people who are low in agreeableness have no trouble expressing what they want and what they need, and people who are high will have trouble going against what other people want and what other people need. So this is another potential for friction here. Now we're into Extraversion. I think it's pretty self-explanatory, but again here you have two introverts. You've got Flora and Tecna, and if you really look at it in the show, Flora and Tecna are left by themselves a lot, and you see Stella and Bloom together because those two are best friends, and then when Layla comes in season 2, you have Layla and Musa hanging around. And I think this is not a coincidence. It's just that their level of extraversion, of wanting to be social, is pretty much the same. I do think that Musa is maybe more extroverted than Layla is, but they're pretty similar level. Same way that Stella is quite more extroverted than Bloom is, but Bloom is also quite extroverted, even though she's more in the average scale of that. So a thing about this, which I don't think they portrayed in the show at all. I mean, you just saw like Stella and Bloom go and together, and then, you know, Musa and Layla hang out. But I don't think they really showed how much conflict there can be from being so different in terms of how our social battery is, because they never really showed Flora or Tecna getting so tired from being dragged from this social adventure to another, whatever, which for true introverts, like, that is something that would happen. So this is something to keep in mind if you have different levels of extroversion compared to someone who is close to you in your life. You might be able to handle and gain energy from doing so many things and meeting so many people, but let's remind ourselves that energy levels for like social activities are very different for someone who is high in extroversion and someone who is not. So let's be mindful of that with our friends who are not extroverted, because I do think what I've seen growing up was the introverted had to conform to the extroverted person, which, again, because the extroverted person usually is more vocal and is better at expressing what they want and need than the introverted person is, doesn't mean that the introverted person doesn't know, but just they're not as good as expressing it. Now, let's go to the last two letters, which are actually the first two letters of Ocean: Openness and Conscientiousness. Openness is really interesting because it's about new experiences and also routines. So this again was not shown in the show very much, but for example, Tecna's like appetite for routines, for systems, should have been way more extreme and pronounced than what it was in the show. Because Tecna is very low in openness. Doesn't mean that she's not someone who would hear someone else, but she's very logical, very grounded. And it often felt like in the show it was portrayed as a bad thing, but it's not. Again, I myself am someone who's very high in openness. You might have guessed it from what I'm doing on my channel. I mean, it's very high in openness coded of a person to do this. While I'm really high in openness, I do know that if the entire world were people who were high in openness, we would be screwed, because we do need people who are more grounded and logical, and, you know, people who will question things, whereas instead of being, you know, super curious and interested in them, to actually function in the world. So I think they could have created many more frictions about this. And I would go on a gambler and say, because the only real conflict you had with Tecna was Tecna and Bloom, but Bloom is average in openness, actually. So I would have loved seeing a Tecna and Flora conflict, because Flora is high in openness and high in agreeableness too, whereas Tecna is low in both. That would have been really interesting to see. And I do think when you live in a dorm, because the Winx do live in a dorm, this is something that you would see from roommates. This is a thing that on a day-to-day basis would be like very much something that could bring conflict or that could make a relationship more difficult. Anyways, last one, C, conscientiousness, which is about how thorough one is and one is not. And this is something that we saw briefly, mostly because Stella is the only one that is low in conscientiousness, but it wasn't seen enough, because especially in the school environment, which Althea is a school, even though they do barely any school in the show, this is like the one thing when you're in an organization, a school, a team, that would be so infuriating. Because low in consciousness people are people who don't really care about the deadlines, who won't respect them, and so will completely drive the people who are high in conscientiousness, who are doing things on the dot, insane. And we have seen that Stella, not very fond of school and not too interested in putting effort into her schoolwork, whereas the other Winx are much more studious. And again, there would have been a lot more conflicts around that. I think, especially around that age, when you have people who are like very focused on school and few people who are very not focused on school, who are much more focused on partying, people, they just don't become friends. Like, that's the premise of the show was, oh, they just live together in the same dorm and automatically they're friends. But quite frankly, I don't think most of them would be friends. I can see Stella and Bloom still being friends. Well, Bloom, as I said earlier, could be friends with any of the Winx, like one-on-one, if she wasn't so inconsistent in terms of character. Like, if she is always that, without like the plot interfering, I think she could be friends with everyone. I do think Musa and Layla can be really good friends. I don't think Flora and Musa could be good friends on the long term, because I do think Musa, actually Flora, Musa and Stella are two people I don't think she could really become friends with, because they are the type of people who would project their hurt onto her, and she's someone who's agreeable, who will take it. And, you know, I don't really like what the dynamic would be like. I think Flora could be generally friends with Bloom and Layla. She could get along just fine with Tecna too, but I do think they would be a bit too different to mesh really well. But they're both mature enough that they could, like, be friendly. Now, Tecna, honestly, I can see her being friendly with Layla. They don't really have a lot in common, so I don't think, you know, they would be super friends or anything. And again, friendly with Bloom and also Flora. But again, you have Tecna, who is very conscientious, and you have Musa, who is very disorderly. And that is, again, Tecna is a system woman. Well, girl. She was not a woman yet in season 2. So living with someone who's very disorderly is something that they really did not show how much that can weigh on a relationship, especially for roommates at that age too. Like, anyways, Stella, as I said, could be friends with Bloom. I don't think Stella could be really good friends with any of the other Winx. I think she would steamroll Flora. Her and Musa just would go at it all the time. She doesn't have much in common with Tecna at all. They're pretty polar opposites. Probably would respect her, but not get along with her. And even with Layla too, I don't think they get along particularly well. Even with like they don't really have a lot in common in terms of like letters and if they're average, low, or anything. So Stella really is only compatible with Bloom. I'm trying to see. Layla, as I said, would be friends with Musa. She could be friends with Bloom and Flora. Friendly with Tecna. Like, cordial. But, yeah. I think I did this. Well, Musa could be friends with Layla. I think that Musa and Layla work because Layla can't stand up for herself if Musa jabs at her. Whereas Flora is not really there yet. Well, she's not there yet. She is not going to be there yet because this is like personality traits are pretty much stable. Let me see. I think I did the list for everybody. So basically, what you kind of need to take notes from what I just said is that figure out what your big five is, where you fall, and figure out people who are close to you and where their big five falls. Because when you look at this, you will better know how to interact with someone else. I will give you an example. It doesn't mean that you can't be friends with people who are different than you. It just means that you need to be more mature and more skilled at communication if you're going to be friends, like generally friends with someone who's very different from you. I'm gonna give you an example in my real life, whereas I'm rather on the low average but low end of neuroticism, and my best friend is high on neuroticism. based on what I just said, we shouldn't be friends, because it's like you've got someone who worries a lot, really anxious, and someone who really does not get much of anything. Like, again, I was depressed at some point. I talked about it on my channel, but like once that was done, like it was done. And on a daily basis, I don't get invaded by negative emotions much at all. I'm pretty much of a chill cucumber. So again, I do have experiences of negative emotions, just not something that is like consistently going on for me, whereas it is very much the case for her. So one problem you could have from being on two opposite ends of a scale is a mismatch of understanding, because, for example, I have enough of perspective because of how I think, because I think a lot about people, how people think, how people feel, etc. Not that I care how they feel, but I think about it. Like, I really like analyzing people's stories. I mean, that's the entire purpose of my channel. And also, after training as a hypnotherapist, like, there are a lot of things that sometimes I hear, I'm like, oh, ding, I just heard something that you said that I think there's something behind there. And I've gotten quite good at noticing when people are saying something without saying something, and I'm like, oh, I just got that. And the closer I am with someone, naturally, the better I am at deciphering when there is something else hiding behind what they just said, because I know how they usually talk. So to go back to me and my friend, if I were not someone who had that much perspective, because it's also part of my job, mind you, it would be something that could be really difficult on a day-to-day basis, because a lot of her anxieties I could dismiss because I genuinely can't relate, and I'm like, there is no way you can think that this is like stupid, quote unquote. But it's not stupid for the person who's experiencing the anxiety. The anxiety is very much real and it's there for a reason. So instead of like carrying a judgment because you're like, why would you think that, or why whatever, because again, someone who is low in neuroticism, who can't generally relate because they don't have that experience, might resort to, then, you know, you can judge the person with high neuroticism, which, no, don't do that. Try to understand instead, be curious, and then lead them to understand what's going on, because there's a reason why they're feeling the anxiety they're feeling. It's not just popping up from nowhere. And this is like my dynamic with my friends. So this is how I could be an asshole without meaning to, if like I were to judge what she is experiencing, feeling, based on the fact that I'm not experiencing any of those things. Now, on the other end of the things, my friend who is high on neuroticism could project all of her anxieties onto me and assume that is how I'm feeling and thinking. For example, I'm gonna give, and I'm sure you're probably gonna watch it while doing crochet or something. My friend knows, she does watch a few of my videos. But for example, this is a funny anecdote now. I am very mad at the fact when I text, because some of you will relate, some of you can't be bothered about texting. I usually like voice memo because I'm a really slow texter, and when I text, I just, say what I say and that's it. I got into the habit of adding a bit more emojis to be able to say what it is I'm saying, and because I noticed that sometimes you can come across as really cold and harsh what I write, but it is very much what I am thinking. And one time I wrote something that was very short, and it was just mostly because I didn't have much to say. I was like, just short response, but no punctuation whatsoever, no emoji. And on the other side of the device, my friend thought that I was mad at her, and I wasn't. But because that is what she would assume, and because she has the tendency to go towards anxiety for things, and she's much more anxious than I am, it's like, oh my goodness, she didn't write whatever, so something must be wrong, because for her own experience, if she were to do this is what would happen. So, and it wasn't, and then we talked it out, and then we laughed about it afterwards. Anyways, hope you didn't mind me sharing that story too much. Anyways, this is like the reality of how human interactions go. when you don't have the same way of thinking or feeling as someone else, it's very easy to assume that they have the same way of thinking and processing things as you do, but they don't. So once you figure out what their way of thinking or feeling or experiencing is, it's very much easier to be able to relate to them, because you know that, okay, this is a person who is low in openness, so she likes her routine, she doesn't like experiencing new things. So instead of telling her that if I want to go out because I'm really extroverted and I really want to go, and she's not particularly that extroverted, but she's like average or more so low, but I want to spend time with her. So instead of like inviting her to somewhere she has never been, especially if it's someone who's low in introversion, well, who is introverted and low in extroversion, instead of inviting her to some place she's never been where there's a lot of people, let's invite her like to the usual like coffee place that we've been going to for years, because she likes her routines and she likes places that are familiar, and this place isn't too crowded. You see how this can apply in real life? So I would love if you could share how you would, based on what I just said, if there's something that comes to mind about how you can change an interaction you have with someone now that you understand that you might be operating from different personality traits. You know, some people don't have the bandwidth to deal with what you're going to do or say, and you shouldn't be imposing yourself on other people, but you also should not be being rolled over by other people either. You know, there's like an equilibrium to everything. So let's all be respectful of ourselves and respectful of others too. And I do say, like, respect yourself. Like, do respect yourself first, because I do think, do tell me if that's you, but I am willing to bet that the people who are watching these videos are very much more on the people pleaser end of the spectrum than the other end of the spectrum. I have noticed that in my life I have a lot of people pleasers around, and I am like, okay, no, let's not assume it's your fault. Let's not take the blame for things that are not yours. You know, that's something I'm used to saying a lot. So I wonder if that's also true of like the internet audience, if that's also you. By the way, I'm gonna say it now. I'm gonna plug it. Do subscribe if you've made it this far and you're not subscribed yet. I mean, that would be awesome. I honestly can't thank you guys enough. I mean, I don't know if you will be watching this video, honestly, because I did like disappear for a month. I've been working on something, so I'm actually gonna tell you about it. And yeah, there have been new subscribers, even though I did not post a video for a month. So that was like that was really interesting, and I was like, wow, I can't believe it. I'm not even publishing any videos at the moment. Anyways, so I have been working on things. Those of you who have known about it might know that I'm a web designer and a hypnotherapist. I did work on doing my web designer website, and I'm also working on my hypnotherapy website. So by the time this video is out, my hypnotherapy website will be up as well. So if you guys are interested in relaxation recording, you know, like a self-hypnosis for relaxation, calming down the nervous systems, being able to find like peace in your body, in your mind, having easier sleep, I'm gonna put the link in the pinned comment, and you will find the link to my website and to the recorded audio, which is a freebie, by the way. And so you sign up to the newsletter that I've got, that I'm putting in place, and you receive the relaxing recording. And thank you for, you know, still watching my videos. If you made it all the way to the announcement and the subscribe of it all, and the check the website in the description part of the video, I really appreciate it. Thank you guys. On these words, I did promise that there was going to be an oracle card pulled, and so here's the reveal. It's really beautiful. Wait, I'm gonna try, yeah, I'm gonna do it like this so you can see it properly. So you will have noticed that it is in French, le raton laveur, which is, I don't know what the word for it is in English for this animal, but anyways, I'm going to read you the description now. This deck is from Aurélie Bia. It's called The Oracle of Authenticity. I'm showing also the book. This is one that my mom found, by the way. Does it have a number? I don't think it does. It doesn't. So yeah, this is one that my mom found. Ah, the description is is funny. Okay, so I'm showing this to you. I mean, if I've got some people in my audience who can read French, so you've got it here. I hope that it's like readable. Anyways, so can't remember what animal it is in English, but you saw the image. So keywords, we've got joy, we've got amusement, and espièglerie. What would this be? It's like kind of like prankster energy. Espièglerie is like those who like pranks, who like mischievous. Yeah, mischievous energy. Okay, I'm gonna try and translate directly. I want to play and to play tricks. I am not really mean, but I don't let myself be easily caught. I come here to remind you to have fun and do not take it too seriously. Life is a big, not gaming ground. Life is a big playground. So play. Take pleasure in every activities. This card reminds you to joy while remaining focused on your objectives. Breathe in, breathe out, and don't forget to take it said don't forget to take some good time. That translation would be a bit weird. So don't forget to have some good time. Don't forget to have fun. I think that would be a more accurate translation. So yeah, on these words, people, do have fun. Do something fun. Do something joyful today. And if you're open to it, share it with me in the comments. As you know, I'm having a cup of tea. So this is like my moment of joy of the day. I always begin the day with like a cup of tea or coffee. Milk coffee, because I can't drink coffee straight. It's too bitter for me. And I think I might do some karaoke tonight. My mom and I have like a small karaoke thing. That's something that we like to do too. And it's the weekend, so yeah. Go have fun, guys, and I'll see you in the next one. This is a new format, by the way, and I'm going to continue with the weekly uploads where I just don't do much editing at all, and I just straight up air it out like this. It's, you know, it's like unedited, raw, just me talking. Yeah, have fun.